Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of The Hype. This is going to be another different episode of The Hype. It's another Battalion 1944 related video, very similar to the one I did with Joe Brammer not so long ago before the first alpha of the game came out. But this time I have with me Phantasy, as it's kind of the timely time to do an interview with you, I suppose, right? Because you've been heavily involved with Battalion very early on, much more early on than most people. And then obviously the second alpha releases the day after this interview drops. And also alongside all of that, it was officially announced that you would now be working with the Bulkhead team officially as an employee on the project Battalion 1944. So I feel like with all that kind of happening, it was fitting, I think, now to do an interview with you to kind of talk a little bit about all of that good stuff, as well as maybe get some background information from some of the people out there who may not know who you are. Because I feel like a lot of people who are old school COD players who are coming into Battalion probably do know who you are, right? But there's always a collection of people who are just new in general, right? Who maybe never played back then, but are still really interested in the game. And so maybe this can kind of be for them, right? To get a little bit of added information. I would be one of those people, to be like very honest. I mean, I obviously played a little bit of COD 4 Pro Mod back in the day, and I did commentary for the North American scene for like CEVO tournaments and stuff like that, but I was never heavily ingrained in the scene, right? So it'll be a learning experience for me as well as viewers out there. But for those of you who don't know who I am, who are really big followers of Battalion, like I said, I did a big interview with Joe Brammer that you can check out. Maybe some of that information's a bit outdated now. I mean, it was a few weeks ago, or maybe even longer than that, but some of it, like the core philosophy of the game, the goals, all that's still the same, I think. So it's still a good interview worth checking out. We talked for about 2 hours. I think it's the longest interview anyone from Battalion's ever done. You know, we have these little short spots at E3 and stuff like that, but that one was like a really lengthy interview. So if you really want like all the details, you can check that out. I come from CSGO as a commentator, analyst, and content creator, and I'm interested in Battalion, and so that's why I'm doing this. But maybe just briefly introduce yourself, Fantasy, before I start asking you some questions, if you just want to kind of give a brief...
Yeah, give you a life
little
story.
Teaser, little appetizer.
Yeah, so... well, I mean, I've been PC gaming for a very long time. You can cast your mind back around like 14 years or so. I started around 2004. I actually got my first PC, so I started it's kind of in the early days, I guess, of PC gaming at least. So my first game was Medal of Honor, and then that was like my main game for a while. Then I went to Call of Duty 1, Call of Duty 2, and then most notably, of course, where I'm most known, COD 4, which had Pro Mod. In that time, I did play some other games. You know, I played all the classics, E.T., Quake, Unreal, Battlefield series. But that was kind of like the main path. So I was always like a competitive player, especially, and I think that really started in like COD 1. And then COD 2 is kind of where I was, so I must have been about 14, 15, when COD 2 was kind of in its prime. And this is where I started to see about esports. This is where esports started, you know, I think maybe to grow. I think 2009. I mean, it's a bit further on than COD 2. But this is where I started seeing teams like Dignitas, Tech9, Serious Gaming, and stuff like that. So towards the end of COD 2, this is where I decided that I actually wanted to go into esports and try and play in a professional team. Weirdly, before I played COD 2, I actually never played all weapons before. Is what we call it. You have like the all weapons and then the rifle only. So it was like two separate scenes. Rifle only, of course, you only play with rifles. It had its own kind of scene. It was separated from the competitive scene or the general scene. And I only played rifle only in Medal of Honor, COD 1 and COD 2. So I'd never even played like scrims or anything or in a team with automatic weapons. But this obviously had to change when COD 4 came out because it doesn't have rifles. And obviously if I wanted to be an esport player, it had to be all weapons. So at the end of COD 2 is where I started to play in all weapons. Is where I started playing Clan Base, which was a big website back in the day.
Yep.
For online tournaments. And then in COD 4, I just tried to join the team very quickly. I was like 16 years old on the game's release, maybe even just before 16. So I was in a couple of teams, and I actually got kicked from my original teams because I used to rush too much. My play style was very aggressive, very pubby. Like you can compare it to like Stewie 2K or something from CS. You know, he just came from nowhere, and he would just run in and he would just do these like these crazy plays. So that's what my play style was, and I got kicked from a couple of teams because they were, you're too aggressive, you don't play as a team. But I was an SMG, so that was kind of the point to run in. And then I joined my first team, was called Exabyte. Everyone was a lot older than me, but I posted. This is when we were using like MIRC or IRC, and we had like COD4.wars, and had these things. And I actually posted on the COD4.wars that I was looking for a team. I put on this post that I was LANable. So I'd never been to a LAN at this point, and I actually wasn't planning to go to a LAN. I just put LANable in my post because I thought it would get me a better team.
Right, of course.
And Makes then sense. I actually joined the team that was good, and then we were going to go to LAN. My first LAN was I-33, so the I-Series in Somnia LAN. And I had to go to the LAN then, and it was too late. So that's where it started. It was a good job I did go to that. And then we basically, in that Expite team, we were first in clan base online, and then we went to I-33, which was the second ever COD4 LAN. I-32 was the first one, but that came out that was a week after the game released, so the game had no real...
Right.
There was no pro mod. It was PAM4 back then, but it didn't have anything back in I-32. It was like the game was like basically raw, had all the bad stuff in it. So I-33, we placed really well. We came fourth, and we got picked up by Reason Gaming, which was a pretty big org back then. And then since then, it really just spiraled. I played about 7 or 8 years. I joined, played in some of the top teams, Team Dignitas, TCM for a long time. In 2011, we were one of the best teams. And towards the game's end, I played in Mind Sanity and Western Wolves. We were the dominant team. We won, pretty much every event for 2 years or so. And then after COD 4, I've just been around CS, League,
right,
Overwatch, semi-pro, just kind of everywhere. Just doing YouTube and streaming.
So you said that, like, I mean, you talked a lot about how in COD 4 Pro Mod specifically with I-33 and stuff that like that's whenever you like started actually joining like organizations and like I guess that might be like the step where you actually call yourself a professional player, right? When you're actually sponsored by somebody and like maybe they're perhaps like paying you or at least like helping you with travel or helping you in some way, they're supporting you in some way. That's like maybe the threshold where you can finally say, okay, like I've crossed into this, now I'm a professional. But you said you kind of actually started out in Call of Duty 2, which is like maybe interesting because I feel like this game, Battalion 1944, seems to kind of be a blend, I guess you could almost say, like trying to take the best elements of COD 2, because obviously World War II setting, World War II weaponry, bolt-action rifles, not as much automatic weapons. There's still a lot of, semi-automatic stuff. But the movement obviously is very rooted in COD 4 because of sprint, right? I mean, that's really like the biggest thing, So, like, did you ever, like, you talked a lot about your Call of Duty 4 career, but did you ever hit like a high level in Call of Duty 2 in your opinion, or were you more of like, that's just you kind of getting started?
I guess kind of getting started. I mean, I only really played, as I said, the all weapons where, stuff actually mattered. It was like maybe 6 months before COD 4 release, so I joined the clan-based team then, and we were trying to, push up the clan-based ladder. I think we were in the top 10 or somewhere in clan-based, which back then was okay, but we weren't like, we never went to LANs. I wasn't really in a professional team or anything like that. I didn't have sponsors. I wasn't in an organization. It was just simply a team that was, pretty good at the game. So yeah, that's when I made the jump to COD 4, and I was like, this is where I'm really gonna push and really gonna try and do it properly, because now there's a chance it's a new game. Right.
And so with COD 4, I know this is going to be a hard question for you to answer, right? Like, this is going to sound really shit when I ask this question. It'd probably be best if I asked, like, some type of non-biased third party that just, was really familiar with the scene. But if you could separate yourself from yourself for a moment and just be as objective as possible, where do you think you stood as a professional player in COD 4 Pro Mod? Like, where do you think you were at, like, at your peak or what have you? Like, how good do you think you really were, or your teams really were?
I would say in the early days, so we're talking like 2008 to 2000, well, basically just 2008. This is like the first year the game came out. I played when I was in Reason Gaming. The team was good. We used to win the UK lands and stuff, but when we went to European events, we wouldn't. Did we win? I don't even know if we won any European events, or we were just placed like in the top like 6 or something at European events. Individually, I probably wasn't at my peak then at all. I think I was still growing because I was still very new to going to events and stuff. When you go to an event and you play, you have nerves, you play a little different. But I'd say my peak. It's hard to say. I think my peak maybe was like 2009, or I feel like I had a peak at like 2009. It's hard to say because I played different weapons throughout my whole COD 4 like career. I played every single weapon in a professional team. I felt like I was very versatile as a player. I played SMG in a lot of top teams. I played the sniper role for Dignitas. I used to play the AK-47 on a lot of maps as well. I'd say in like 2011, sorry, 2009, when we were in TCM, we were like the first and second best team. I think Fnatic were probably a little bit above us back then with like Stevie and stuff. We went to the two biggest European events that year, and we came second to Fnatic both times in the same fashion that we came from the lower bracket, and then we lost one map on the strike both times, and we ended up losing. At that point, I'd say probably one of the better players in the game. You know, I used to frag the most, but it's hard to say individually. I don't think I could ever say I was one of the best players, or anyone's really any of the best players. I get that question a lot. It's who is the best player in a game. It's kind of like CS2. I think any team game, you can't really ever choose a best player because the game is so team orientated. I think every player can have their day or their time where they're really good, and then other times they're not. So for me, I'd probably say 2009, but then I also think towards the end of like 2013 and 14, when I was in My Insanity and we were winning every event, I was playing really well individually. But back at that time, the game didn't have as many good teams. So it's kind of hard to say, because I feel like if there was more competition, maybe we wouldn't have got, done so well consistently.
So do you think, like, once you got established, though, that you were always, like, in kind of like a top 5 team in the world scenario for most of your career then? Like, based on what you're saying from the placements that you had and stuff like that, is that fair? Like, you would call yourself, like, part of the top 5 or whatever of the world?
Yeah, I am. Well, I mean, if I look, I have, like, a long list. I think I went to, like, over, like, 50 events or something. And pretty much every event I ever attended, apart from maybe a couple, I placed in the top 5, mostly top 3. So the teams I was in were quite consistent, I'd say. Like for the TCM era, we were like first and second at every event. The My Insanity and Western Bulls, we won every event. Then I had like a period where I was in Dignitas, and we went to a couple of events. We went to one in Croatia, I think, where we actually beat Fnatic, and we came first then. So yeah, I'd say my placings were quite consistent. It was really only in the first, like, the 2008 era where it was in Reason Gaming, was it kind of a little shaky. We would win the UK event, so we would lose versus the bigger dogs in Europe at that time.
Right. So well, like, if you had to put, like, a span on it, how long were you a professional Call of Duty 4 player for? Like, you said you started, like, around 2008, and then you mentioned, like, 2013 was kind of towards the end, so is that about right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah,
that 5-year span?
I think, was the last event that I went to. That was in District Prague, I think. Or it was, I think it was 2013 that was the last event. So it's maybe it was 2014. I'm sure it was 2013, but my mind is not sharp.
Right, I got you.
But it's somewhere around that year. So it's like a span of like 6 years or so, 6 years, 7.
So that's like 4 years ago then, right? Because we're obviously midway through 2017 now. So I think we've got like at least like a background about you being a competitive gamer, and then like, getting into COD 2 and COD 4, in this like 2006, 2008 time period, and playing for those 5 years. While you were playing, like, were you doing something else? I mean, most people had to have been, right? It's not like you could just make a living off of that at that time period. So what else did you rely on to get by? Like, were you a student? Were you doing full-time work in something else? Like, what was your life outside of competitive COD?
Yeah, so when I started, that was when I just started college. So I was just doing like, an interactive media course. Then I went to university, and I was doing game design, which I graduated in. There was actually a point where I think I didn't play for at least a couple, like 8 months or so, during my second year, because I just didn't have the time to play. I wasn't really interested in playing so much. So I graduated in my university course for game design. And after that, I was one of these students where I went into game design thinking that I would really enjoy it because I like to play games, so I like to make games. And I came out at the end and I didn't really have any drive to even pursue that career, which coincidentally now is actually very beneficial because I'm using the Unreal Engine and stuff at work with Battalion. So it actually has now come back years later when I didn't think I would ever need it.
Right. That's why I asked, actually.
Yeah, now I'm actually using it. So I was like opening the program and I was like, wait, I remember everything. But yeah, so from like time from university to now, I pretty much only just focused on like YouTube and streaming. So streaming and stuff on YouTube is my main income. And I was doing like...
and that's for the last 4 years, like between 2013 and now? Okay.
Yeah, so and I was also doing some like stuff for ESL UK. like I was, or just any kind of editing game for game companies, doing like frag movies, highlights, recaps, and stuff like that. But it was mostly for ESL UK for their Premiership that we have over here.
Okay, so you're saying that like streaming and YouTube content creation and doing some freelancing was like basically how you've been like supporting yourself for the last 4 years and stuff like that. What made you go into that? Was it just because it was like another outlet for you to stay in gaming, or like what kind of took you from, like, I guess my question would be is like, why did you go the route of being like a streamer and a content creator as your primary income after COD, rather than like what maybe some other players have done, which is transition to another esports title and continue on your career as a player, particularly with the fact that there are some big games out there right now that you can make a career out of being a player? And was it just because that's just not what you wanted to do? You didn't find another game that fit you, or I'm just kind of curious why you didn't think you continued on competitively in another title.
Yeah, it's something that I actually really wanted to do. It's something I did try to do. When I was doing my COD 4 stuff, as you probably know, I have my YouTube channel, so I was doing that on the side as well. So I already amassed quite a following from that.
Yeah.
And then after COD 4, when I was playing COD 4, I was also playing League of Legends. So I was playing League of Legends. I played it since the beta. I played it a very long time back then. Very early stage, and there was actually the story where we were going towards this land called AEF in 2010, and I said to Odie, I went on the Eurostar with Odie, the manager of Dignitas, and I said to him that I feel like League of Legends is going to be a really huge esport game. At this point, it was like nothing. They didn't have anything. It was like 16 champs. It had nothing, and I said to him that I want to quit COD 4 and I want to make the first League of Legends team for Dignitas. So I feel like the game's going to be big, and he said, yeah, sure, you can do that. And in the end, I didn't do it. I didn't know. I didn't think that it was. I kind of thought it was going to take off, but then it didn't for a while. So I continued to play COD 4, and then I kind of quit gaming for a little bit in that 8-month that I said about in 2011. Yeah. And then I came back, and it was like too late by that point. So I was playing League of Legends. I was trying to pursue League of Legends professionally for a while. I used to play in I was a high Diamond player. I was playing Diamond 1 for multiple seasons, or just up and down Diamond. I played in like a semi-pro team called Team Infused in the UK. And then after a while, that didn't work out either. So then I went to CS:GO, and I was like, all this time, I really hated
UK CS:GO. Here we go.
I really hated CS. I was so. If you watch like my older videos, I was just so against CS. I was like, I don't like CS. It doesn't fit my play style because I'm very aggressive. I want to jump around. I want to fly around and stuff. And I just couldn't believe that I was going to go to CS:GO. But I craved an FPS game, and it was the only active one at the time that could be played. So I played a lot of CS:GO, and I feel like I got individually pretty good at CS:GO. I spent a lot of time in like teams and stuff, but as you said, it's the UK scene in CS is some kind of.
I'm not gonna say anything. I'll let you do this work.
It's so hard to just do really anything if you're focusing on UK CS. You have to branch out to Europe, and it's just something that I just never did. I went to a lot of UK LANs with a lot of mixed teams. I played with some good players, but in the end, nothing really come of it. So I started making CS:GO content on YouTube instead of COD 4 stuff. I focused onto CS. I was making stuff. I got quite some followers from CS too. I was making tutorials and stuff for movies, and then I was streaming CS too, and it was going pretty well. And then Overwatch was coming out, so now I think, okay, well, this may be my last chance to play professional in a game. Overwatch is new. It's kind of like a COD 4 all over again. It's a brand new game. I could get in early, so I played Overwatch, and I killed my stream and my YouTube channel because I went to Overwatch. No one was interested in Overwatch from my followers.
Wow. Okay.
So my view is like cut in half, or like even like
Whoa.
3/4. So I lost loads of stuff. I was posting if I posted like an Overwatch video, I'd get like again a quarter of the views I was previously getting. So I tried to ignore that, and just because I wasn't really making enough to survive very comfortably by doing the streaming anyway. And I thought, okay, if I just become a professional player in Overwatch, then I'll get more following, maybe a newer following,
right?
And it will eventually work out. So I played in a team that was like a semi-pro team. We were like a tier 2 team. It was called Endpoint, which is like a UK org. It was like a new UK org that picked us up, and we were actually doing pretty well versus the top teams in the game. With tier 2, we could potentially, if we were looking for a new sponsor, a new organization afterwards to move into like a gaming house and stuff. And then I got poached by Mouse Sports, and I took another guy with me, which then killed my Endpoint team. But then in the end, I didn't join Mouse Sports because I didn't get on with one of the players in it. So then after that, I had no Mouse Sports. I mean, the Mouse Sports, that's when I was really supposed to. I was going to move into a gaming house in, I don't know, like in Germany or wherever. I was going to have a salary and stuff. And I thought, okay, things are working out. So then the Mouse Sports stuff didn't happen. And then I went back to my old team. I didn't go back to my old team, but then I looked at my old team and I was like, well, they folded now. they're done.
Right.
So then at that point, I was like, am I really enjoying Overwatch that much? Because I wasn't really, I know it's not really my type of game. Again, I didn't enjoy Overwatch much. I was just playing it because it was the main game I was focusing on and, the one I was trying to pursue. But so then what happened is that COD 4 Remastered came out. Obviously not a competitive game, not by any means. But for content, it was like the best month or so that I think I've ever had on my channel, my streaming. Because everyone's obviously interested. It's COD 4 Remastered. Is it going to be like pro mod? And it's like, so I streamed that and I made videos. I think I made my busiest month of YouTube videos ever. I think I made like 28 videos in a month or something.
Oh wow!
And for me, that's like 2 years of videos. So previously, but I was just like churning videos out. There was so much to talk about, so many things to do. I was streaming every day. I got like 1,000+ viewers on these streams, 600 to 1,000 most streams.
Wow.
But then obviously the hype then just died because the game's terrible. So after a while, it just stopped. And then after that, I was like, okay, well, now I don't really have anything to play. So I think I went back to CS for a bit, and then I saw the whole Battalion thing, and now everything's kind of in Battalion, and everything else is really just like a side stuff. It's not really a focus. It's just like I play games now just to pass the time, but I want Battalion to be successful, not only because I work there, but because the reason I took the job is because I want the game and I believe the game to be successful as a player itself. I want to play the game. Right now I'm an employee, but in 12 months I might not be an employee. I might be a player instead, because that might be just what I want to do.
Well, let's rewind a little bit then, because we're definitely going to get to your employment and stuff like that. But like you noted, I mean, or at least what's apparent to me is that you were involved in Battalion really early on. You were probably one of the first people really to get involved outside of like the developers, it feels like. Like it seems like you came in pretty early on in early play testing. Like when I did my interview with Joe Brammer, and as well as just hearing him talk about the development process with other people that he's done interviews with, I mean, your name does come up a lot as like someone that was like really the guinea pig for the game. Like we know this guy was a former pro in Call of Duty, and that's what we're like kind of striving to be, is to bring back that old school feel of competitive COD, but like in the modern generation with World War II as kind of a backdrop, and kind of blend the best of the worlds of COD 2 and COD 4 and other old school FPS shooters and stuff like that. And they would just throw stuff at you like, does the movement feel right? Like just run around. Like he even mentioned something about how like some of the early builds you were like walking around with like this fucking sci-fi weapon, but it was just for you to be able to run around and feel what the movement felt like.
Unreal Engine weapon.
Right. So I guess my point is how did you get involved in testing early on? Was it like you heard about the game, you reached out to them, or did they reach out to you, or how does that happen?
Yeah, so I actually had I saw the Kickstarter. I didn't actually pledge because the game
scum.
I see the video. The Kickstarter video was good. Obviously they made a lot of money through the Kickstarter, but I could see what they wrote about how the game would be. They said it would not be like old COD 2 and stuff, but it was hard to tell really whether it would really be a great game. I've never pledged on Kickstarter before. It's not something I would probably do with anything anyway. But what happened is I did an article for Vice. I think it's on the article side, the news side, the really big one. And this is an article that someone did about COD 4. What was so great about COD 4, and it was kind of like, I think it was maybe because Remastered was coming out actually, and he did an article for Vice about what COD 4 was like before, and I think he talked about like pro mod and stuff like that, and it was like like a long lost scene that all the new people wouldn't know about, like something they missed out on. And it was I was one of the people that had a section in it. He asked me questions and stuff, and it was also with Pansy and Rob Black, or Morg, the guy, main guy at ESL UK now. He used to be like one of the big people in Pro Mod. He was like the manager of some of the bigger teams, MYM, and he was like the main community guy for a while. He used to run all the like the community stuff and the LANs, and he was the go-to guy. He's also one of the people who helped create Pro Mod, like give it direction. So I think they saw my Vice article, and then they reached out to me from that. And Joe Brammer actually said to me that me and him did actually meet at an event before. He already knew me from COD 4 because they obviously played the game, they followed the scene, and he actually met me apparently at an iSeries somewhere. And he says, like, how we spoke, I spoke to him and stuff, and obviously I don't remember, but he remembers that, like, speaking to me. So he obviously knew who I was. So then he reached out to me from that. He was like, do you want to come and check out the game? Have you seen the game? So I said, yeah, I've seen the game, and their office was only a 30-minute train ride from where I lived anyway, so it was easy to get to. So yeah, then that was really early on. As you said, I got there and the game was very, very bare bones. It was like, I'm pretty sure the first time.
How long ago was this, by the way? Like the first time you went there, how long ago was it?
It would have been probably just over a year ago.
Okay.
I think it was like pretty soon after the Kickstarter, or maybe a year ago. Actually, I think it was maybe just like a bit of a year ago. So I went there. The first time I went there with Rob. He drove us there, and when we were there, they didn't actually have a game to show us at this point. There was nothing to show. It was literally just to talk about ideas, to brainstorm some stuff. They showed the menu and stuff, but there was no gameplay. I couldn't see what the game was like. So that was the first time. And they got me back a couple of months later, or probably like 2 months later, and then that was just me then. From then on, it was only me that went, because Rob was always busy. So I went there that time, and they actually showed me the game, like running around and stuff. Obviously, it was very bare bones. It played like pretty horribly at this point. It had the Unreal weapon, and then what they'd done is they'd actually mapped out Shipment from COD 4, which is like, the really terrible small box DM map with the shipping containers.
Yep.
So we were running around that with the Unreal weapon. And then they showed me some of the maps that were in progress, which is actually the Manor House map. But it's really weird because I remember looking at it then thinking, I can kind of think of what it looked like then and what I thought of it. And now it's like the map is, a lot more fleshed out, but it's kind of hard to distinguish that they're the same map because they look so different in comparison because it's had so much work to it. So then I think I visited about 2 more times after that in this last year. The next time I was then to actually check the movement and play the game. We played a couple of games in the office, and then again we did it again. And yeah, then after that is obviously up to where we are pretty much now.
So when you were doing this, was it more of like just as like a friend and a fan, or was this like as a consultant, or like what would you describe this process as from your perspective?
Maybe a bit of both. I mean, they obviously asked me to go there because they knew that I had, the experience, and they knew that they were making a game that was catered for someone like me.
Right.
So they were taking my feedback and implementing it in the game. I'm pretty sure they would ask me, like, what do you think of this? As you said, what would you do if you would do this? And I told them, and then, if they used that information, it was up to them. But I would just go there because, as I said, it's something I wanted to play. So also as a friend, I would go there and help them because I want to see the game succeed as well. I guess, yeah, a bit of both, friend and consultant.
Yeah, I think this is kind of an interesting answer from you, and kind of want to get your thoughts on this because, like the way that I've been feeling, it's like you're this guy, right? And you were playing this COD 4 Pro Mod game, and you loved it. It was like your passion, right? And you competed in it for so long, and then after that wasn't possible anymore, you were like kind of like this rogue, like wandering around the Badlands, like looking for another game to play, and like you tried CS and you're stuck in the UK, and there's nothing that needs to be said after that. Like that pretty much it's the argument. Then you tried League, for that wasn't happening, and then like you tried Overwatch, and like you got whacked on that whole thing. You like you thought you lost some of your following. You're just like, shit, like maybe that was a bad choice. You're just wandering around lost out here in the wasteland.
Pretty much exactly.
And then all of a sudden this Battalion truck shows up. They're like, hey, we're trying to bring back those good old times. Want to hop on board?
The naked game is like pro mod, and I'm just like, yes.
So I mean, is that kind of how it felt to you? Like you had been kind of wandering around, and finally there was this game that you felt was going to have like the core values that you were passionate about, and so you just kind of wanted to be a part of it, I guess. Like, is that fair?
Yeah, that's pretty much spot on, I'd say. Because I feel like back then when we had COD 4 Pro mode, and you also had like Source and 1.6 as well. Um, we used to have like every event would always be like a double thing where we'd have a COD 4 event and CS, and we would always be like side by side, and we had like this kind of rivalry, but at the same time a somewhat respect that the games were different. Ours was a lot more based on like movement and positioning, and yours was more based on aim and probably even more in terms of teamwork and stuff. But then of course you have like CS:GO comes out, and then your scene just like explodes and it becomes amazing, and ours just like dies because the developers completely disappeared. So there's a lot of people who played these early COD games, especially COD 4 Pro Mod. It used to be quite big back then. It was when esports wasn't so big. COD 4 Pro Mod was a relatively popular game, and had pretty good prize pools. It was in all the big organizations that you see now, like Dignitas, Fnatic and stuff. They had COD 4 Pro Mod teams, and it was one of their main games.
Right.
But then of course it dies. So there's a lot of people out there who played COD 4 Pro Mod who are like me. They don't have, there wasn't a successor to that game.
Right.
And that's kind of in a way what Battalion feels like, I guess, is somewhat of a successor. It's kind of caters to those people, and it can also bring in new people who never had to time or weren't experiencing what COD 4 Pro Mod was like back then.
Let's hold that thought for a moment, because we're going to come back to that a little bit here towards the end of the interview about that whole concept you just talked about COD 4 kind of fizzling out and CS taking off and stuff like that, because I do have a couple more questions about that, but I want to talk a little bit more about the Battalion alpha process first before we get there. I think that could be a good cap on the end to talk about the esports side of it. But so when you were doing this early on, kind of like testing of the game and stuff like that, what were your honest and brutal thoughts at that time? Like, were you always very optimistic about it, or were there times when you said, man, I just can't see this working out? Like, what were your thoughts and feelings throughout this process, like leading up to the first alpha, I guess, right? Because up until then, no one really knew what was going on, like other than the gameplay footage that came out like right before the alpha came out, like whenever y'all, well, I guess I'm saying y'all because you're a part of it now, but you weren't then. But whenever they took it at Rezzed, right? Like, it was like the first time the public really got to play it. Besides that one, like COD 2 tournament that they did,
Forgotten Soldiers Land.
Yeah, so there was that. Was like, I guess, the first time anyone touched it really outside of like yourself and devs. And then they brought it to Rezzed, DGX Rezzed, and then that's when like there was a lot more of a public reception. And then obviously we have like the alpha and E3 and stuff like that, right? But so before the Forgotten Soldiers event, you were the main one, and how are you feeling about it, up until up at that point,
I think optimistic, just because I think it's because I think it's been, as I said before, beneficial that I have the game design degree, because I can see the process and I know the process of how long it takes to make a game. So when they say, this is what we've got right now, this is what we want to do, I can see the vision of how it can be done and what they want to do. But if I was like, just a casual player, or anyone who looks at kind of any alpha game, they just look at the game and they go, this game looks bad. Yeah,
I had that experience with Crucible, which is a game that Amazon's developing. Maybe you've heard of it, but can't talk too much about it. But it's basically, what I can tell you, it's like a third person, kind of like Battlegrounds, but it has really like a more of a sci-fi spacey feel to it. And the big thing about it is it's not about looting. It's about it's like a class-based shooter almost. So it's like blending Overwatch and Battlegrounds together kind of thing. And it's being developed by the game studio, by Amazon. So I can get your point, because I'm not a game developer right now. I went and I tested that game. And while I can't talk too much about it, NDAs of course, I get what you mean. You can only, as someone who's not a game developer, you can't necessarily see the vision as well. You can only see what's in front of you. Whereas someone like yourself, because you have that background, you can kind of see that vision. So I get where you're coming from on that. So continue with that.
It's also partly, I think, because, as I said, their vision. I know what the vision is because I want to make that vision as well. What the game that they're trying to make, it's. The problem, as I said before, with Pro Mod is that it was so limited in what we had, because it was just a mod. It wasn't even like Source where you had an actual game. It was just a mod of a game. So we were extremely limited in what we could do. And this Battalion, it can take the best parts, and this is what I could see before. It can take the best parts of that game, but it can add what a competitive game needs. A matchmaking system, leagues, ranks, maps. You can just have pretty much any of it. It's like there's so much potential with the game and the idea itself, which is why I could see at the start, because it can do everything that I knew that Pro Mod lacked, and why Pro Mod would eventually die, because it couldn't do any of these things. It was just a mod.
Right. So, like, one of the things that Joe talked about in the interview is, like, they really wanted to focus on movement mechanics more than anything else, because they felt like like maps and stuff like that could easily be developed, and like that wouldn't be a big issue, but the core values of the game had to be on point. And like the biggest thing is movement, isn't it? Because that's kind of like one of the highlights of COD, like the COD 4 Pro Mod. Like you mentioned it yourself when you were talking about when you were trying to find other games that you just love, like being able to jump around and strafe around, and like the movement is such a core value to the system. And so would you say that like you had a lot of hand in shaping that? Like, I guess where do you think you had the most influence, or where do you think that you contributed the most in these early stages before you actually became an employee? Like, what impact do you think you had? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'd probably say the movement stuff, because that's really what the main focus they were using me for on my visit to do the gameplay stuff, was to check if the movement was like COD 4 Pro Mod's movement, because they needed me to be able to strafe, and do these long jumps. Like, we had times where like I would do these like strafe jumps on COD 4 to get to certain places, and the guys in the office couldn't do it. So they wanted me to go there and just to see if it felt fluid, just to see if I could sit down in front of the computer and play the game and go, this feels good, is essentially what they wanted me to say. And if I would sit down and go, this feels like shit, then they would know that they need to do something, and they would say, okay, what feels wrong with it? As you said, it's the core fundamental, because the game is based around being able to move fast and fluent. It's kind of like having Quake and not making the movement great, and then maps can always be made, especially you have like as I said, it's open to community. A lot of community maps can be like CS, where you have all these people making maps and stuff. Maps can always come, but if the game itself feels bad and then you have hundreds of maps, it doesn't really matter about having loads of maps, because the game is not good,
right,
in general.
Right. So now like, and then again, we're still on the timeline before you're an employee, but I want to talk about one more topic before we get into you actually being employed, and that is the fact that by now, to the public, even though there's like NDAs out there for alpha players, like publicly we've seen a lot of gameplay footage already now, right? Like there's plenty of gameplay footage out there now from EGX Res, mostly, when like yourself and a bunch of other YouTube creators got like access to like this one video. I think it's of Joe Brammer playing, and like people were doing like their own thoughts and comments over the top of that. And you were certainly one of the people that were at the forefront of that. And now, backers have played an alpha, which was basically what people saw in the gameplay footage. Like, there really wasn't very many drastic differences, I feel like, between what I played when I played the alpha and what I saw in the gameplay footage. I felt like I was basically playing the same game that I had watched weeks before. So, and like I said, at this point, you're still not an employee, right? Like, so you still kind of have that third party kind of view on it. What did you think about this alpha and this like initial gameplay footage that came out? Because I guess they're tethered together, basically.
Yeah, I mean the alpha, I'd say that the alpha is probably one of the better alphas that I've played. There was obviously a lot of issues with it. Just general things, movement speed, animations, loads of bugs and stuff. I feel like the alpha was okay. I actually didn't play too much of the alpha, because I'd already obviously played it quite a lot before the alpha came out.
Right.
And they had this this issue where it was not getting the maximum hertz that a monitor can process. So I was like stuck on 60 hertz, and I almost refuse to play games if I don't have more than 60 hertz, because I've been using like 120 plus hertz for like 10 years or something now. So if I use 60 hertz, my eyes are like, oh my god. So
fair enough.
But now that's actually fixed in this next update. So now this one I'll probably play a lot more. But yeah, the first one I think was okay, and I feel like the general consensus of it was that people who played it liked it. I didn't see too much complaining, or saying that the game's not good. Obviously, there's going to be people like that. There's like this whole thing, and I made a video about it, where the fusion of Battalion, and because they a lot of people felt that the game was going to be like a, like a simulation game, kind of
Right.
like,
See,
like an armor and
here's why I
stuff.
wanted to ask you a question actually about this, because I remember earlier in this interview, you mentioned that like you didn't pledge at the Kickstarter and like you thought the video was cool or whatever, but what really drew your attention was what they wrote down.
Yeah.
Like, and for whatever reason, you read what they wrote down. You connected that to this game that you used to be very passionate about, which is COD 4 Pro Mod, and all the different elements that made that game something you were passionate about, the movement, the mechanics, all that stuff. And so you interpreted it that way. But like you're about to mention now, there's this other group of people who interpret it as thinking it was going to be some type of authentic, or they have a different definition of what authentic means.
Yeah,
and
the
so
authentic thing was crazy.
why do you think there's these massively different interpretations out there of?
I think it really depends if you played the games that they talked about. They mentioned games like like COD 2 obviously, and ET and Quake. I mean, these two I don't personally. From me, I don't know why that's really a comparison, because I don't feel like Quake and ET are similar to the game the Battalion or the other two games. I mean, it's similar because they have the whole strafe jumping mechanic, but I wouldn't personally include them as an inspiration. I guess you could have them as an inspiration, but then if that's the problem, we had another thing where ET players were like, this is nothing like ET, because ET is a lot more like it. When you strafe, it's a continuously bouncing thing. It's like Quake. But I think if they didn't play the games themselves, that's probably why they thought it was different. I think there's maybe a lot of difference in contrast in what was written and what was in the video. I think the video made it a lot more serious, and it seemed the way that it was recorded, it was really nicely recorded, but the way that it was recorded with like the backdrop of tanks and the weapons and stuff like that, I think that's probably, if you just watch, because a lot of people won't read. That's the thing. Some of them will watch the video and go, yeah, that's for me, and they'll just pledge. They didn't read the whole massive wall of text because people hate to read. So if you watch the video, I can see maybe why you'd be confused then. But
they're visiting all these battle sites and museums and looking at these old guns. Yeah, I get what you're saying. But to be fair, like, that is incorporated in the game still, in level design and weapon design and how the weapons look like that. Like, I would say you have to use the word authentic like loosely. Like, you're gonna get some authenticity to the degree to which you can recognize it's a World War II shooter, but like obviously the core elements of like movement and mechanics are still going to be not as authentic. But
so that's the thing, is that they say like authentic and stuff in the video, as you just said, and it's like the environments and the sounds, everything else, the weapons and stuff in the game are all just like you would expect in a World War II game. It's then, but you look under and you look deeper into the Kickstarter. It says we want games like COD 2, ET, Quake, COD 4 Pro Mod or whatever, and that's when you can kind of realize, if you played those games, this isn't going to be a realistically based game. It's going to be a game that's fast-paced, arcadey, and you're jumping around and stuff.
And it felt like, outside of that whole debate that we've just gone through, which me and Joe Brammer talked about that extensively, by the way, in my interview with him, if you guys want to check that out, if you want it from like the horse's mouth on like their goals and philosophy of what Battalion is and what they thought about that particular batch of backlash, I guess you could say, of people who thought it was going to be something other than what it was. And I think even he admitted in that video that like, if he could go back and rewind, he probably would have done it a little bit differently to like make sure expectations were like not drastically different than what was presented. But he also felt that the video was necessary because that's the only way they were able to get the backing they needed to make it happen. Which I think is fair enough, because like I think that was a really well done Kickstarter video, and if they wouldn't have gone that route, then maybe they wouldn't have got enough financial backing, and then maybe none of this development even happened. So I think you have to kind of go listen to Joe Brammer's own words on that, I guess, is basically my point. But the other batch of people who have had backlash are mostly just people who said, oh, the graphics suck. Like that's the only other backlash group I've seen. Or the other famous one is, well, Call of Duty's come out the World War II game, so what's the point in this one? Like,
COD 2 already exists, so I play that instead.
Yeah. So what do you have to say to those things? I guess is kind of like your philosophy on that.
Well, I mean, the graphic stuff is almost, it's because they compare the graphics of the Kickstarter video to the graphics in the game right now. But the thing is that the Kickstarter video's graphics, it's like more like, it's not like processed in the engine kind of way. Like, it's really like more photo realistic looking. You wouldn't be able to play a game it wasn't optimized and stuff. You know what I mean? It looks really nice, but it's like to play a game like that would be pretty hard at that point. So the graphics and stuff can easily be, updated over time. It's just it's adding texture. The graphics right now, to be honest, once I'd say a couple more passes on the textures and stuff, and add in these objects and stuff that make maps look nice. A lot of it comes down to lighting as well. Right now the game doesn't have the greatest lighting because they're not really focused on lighting. They're not and again, they're not focused on graphics. It's about the core fundamentals first. And with the World War II for Call of Duty, that's actually a big one I see too. Like, this game is going to die because Call of Duty 2, World War II is coming out. But the target audience is so incredibly different because the Call of Duty on PC has died as a game that was popular probably, I don't know, like 6-7 years ago maybe. I think like the last few games don't even reach like 10k sales, barely 5k sales. On release week, they barely get 1,000 concurrent players.
Don't even fucking talk to me. I got Ghost. Holy shit!
I haven't bought a Call of Duty game apart from the remastered one for years because I know that they're just not good. They're not made for PC. They're made for the console. They port over. They have a limited amount of issues. No FOV changer, no FPS changer. The list just goes on. So the Call of Duty World of War 2. I'll play it because I'll be able to stream it and it'll probably be fun. It's the kind of game where I play for like a couple of days, I stream it, I throw it away. But console is where the Call of Duty is now. It's just changed. And so Battalion is focused on the PC market, which Call of Duty left behind basically on the PC. So it's a competitive game. It's based on competition for esports. It's basically should be hopefully at some point a similar game to CS:GO in the way that it works, the way it's set up with all the teams, the leagues, the lands. That's what the goal really of Battalion is. But also, it caters to casual people. It's like CS. CS it caters to casual people as well. But yeah, the target audiences are just completely different. So I'm not worried. I don't think anyone at the team is worried about Call of Duty. It's not like we're trying to compete with Call of Duty. Call of Duty, it's a giant game. It's impossible to compete with such a game. I wouldn't say we're really.
You just have a different target audience. I mean, that's really the bottom line. Really. So now let's get into you actually getting employed. So, because I feel like a lot of this has just been like Battalion up until today, right? From your perspective as a non-employee, because we've got like Joe Pammer's perspective as like one of the head guys in the interview I did with him, and so I think it was useful to kind of talk about your background and talk about your approach from the opposite side. But now you've crossed over. You've now become the corporate shill.
I am on the dark side.
Yeah. So how does this even happen? Like, because I mean, you obviously were involved with the development of the game for a while now. You know what I mean? Like you were doing it for leading up to the first alpha. You said your first test was like almost a year ago or something like that. So I guess how come you don't just continue to do that? How come you're now an employee? Like, I mean, and how did that happen?
So I think actually a couple of months ago, Joe actually asked me if I wanted a job there to work as a level designer. But I actually turned the job down because I didn't feel like I hadn't used the Unreal Engine or my degree, or I hadn't touched the programs in so long. I didn't think I was up to the job of being able to make good enough stuff. So I said, I would like to do it, but I just don't think I'm good enough. So then that never followed up. So I never followed that up. And then before the alpha, the first alpha came out at 0.1, and the game was so riddled with bugs and glitches, as expected anyway in an alpha. It's always going to happen. But while they had a QA team, it was quite a lot of people, like 10 people or something. They had a QA team, but this is I don't know where the QA team came from, but they didn't really find any of these like really blatantly obvious problems. I was like QAing the game at home in my own time just because I wanted to help. I wanted the game to be stable, so I would load up my version that I had at home, and then I would give them screenshots and videos of what was broken, how to get out of the map. I think I got out the map in about like 20 seconds or something. I got in the game, I was like, okay, this looks like I can get out here. So I like strafe jumped over these walls and stuff, and I got out the map. I was like, yeah, I'm out the map in 20 seconds. This is like a week or something before the alpha. And his QA team had been like, on the map for ages, loads of them running around. So then Alpha 1 came out, and it had still loads of problems. So in the end, he decided to like remove or hire the QA testers, and then hire me. And there's another guy that he's being hired as well, but he's not here yet because he's gone to America for a while and he's coming back. But he's like another COD 4 player from a while ago, not somebody who's really so well known, no one would really know, but someone that I knew back then. You know, he's pretty good at games and he's got a really keen eye for finding stuff as well. So they offered me a QA job to at the office, and then that also stemmed into just doing community manager stuff as well, because he said that, you know, I'd be wasting my skills really if I was just mindlessly, like, you know, looking for QA stuff all day.
Yeah, you really should be like the voice of these update videos, I feel like. You know what I mean? Like, people already know you, like, your brand's already there, like, you have that credibility about you in that regard. So I think you going through, like, the change logs and explaining them, yeah, I think that makes sense as well, from their perspective and from your perspective.
Yeah, so it's like the QA, I basically like split my time between doing like half QA stuff, half community manager stuff. So now I'm just like on the doing basic stuff like on the forums, websites, and the social media. And then I do like the videos stuff, like, you know, the V2 update, the one I put out today, like a frag movie that they wanted me to do. So yeah, I know like the video editing stuff too. And the QA stuff right now, because the game isn't so massive, it only has like, you know, one properly playable map at this point until the maps are coming along, but it's not going to be until, you know, further updates where there's other maps, and then I can QA those maps. But right now I feel like I'm kind of interested this weekend mostly because I really want to see if people can find bugs, you know, glitches or, you know, problems with the map, collision problems and stuff, because I've really been nailing the QA stuff down this last week or two.
Sure.
So I feel like the map right now and stuff and the game is really solid, a really solid build. There shouldn't, I'm hoping, be any problems. So I'm hoping the forum, when I go on Friday to Sunday, I'm looking on the forum and there'll just be no posts with problems. But yeah, I'm interested to see if there's any.
But obviously, you're living in a fantasy world, like, because that's not going to happen. But somebody will find issues.
Or at least a lot less than before.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, that's a good goal to have, though. Good goal to have. So, like, if you had to explain your day-to-day to people, like, what you actually do, you would just say it's mostly, like, testing and making sure you're finding bugs and then helping with, like, content, basically.
Yeah, so it's just, like, a split between... I was doing a lot of QA stuff in the first week because there was obviously a lot of problems to fix, and then the more that we fix the map, the less there is for me to do on the QA side until they start adding to it, or, you know, I move on to another map or other stuff. So the video stuff has really been the focus this week. We put out like those 2 videos.
So, I mean, I guess, like, when I'm looking at it, I can understand from a Bulkhead's perspective why they would want to hire you and, like, why you would be a good employee for them and, like, why you bring a lot of value to the table for them. And so I get from their end. But from your end, like, I mean, was it more of just, like, you were, like, seeking some type of stability in your life when it came to, like, a career? Or, like, do you wonder if becoming an employee has affected, like, your objectivity? Because, like, obviously before all this, you were kind of like a third-party perspective on things with your YouTube channel to really explain to people about the game, but do so from, like, what people would never be able to really perceive too much bias from it, right? Because they know that you want the game to succeed, and we all do, but you're not an actual employee, so, like, you get what I'm saying? So do you ever worry about that, or like, kind of what went into your decision-making process on that front?
I think it's the streaming, and I think some of it may be to do with the stability. But I think it's just that I really wanted to be more involved with the game than I already was. I just had like a third party, and I would get information every so often about a video or something, but I really didn't know much about the development of what was going into the game. So, and I feel like the QA, even though QA is like a really, it's not the most glorious job, but I think that it's not the most glorious job if you're doing it for a game that you know you're doing it for a big company like Ubisoft or something. You're playing something that you don't want. You're playing the same thing. But I'm actually essentially just doing what I was doing at home, but now I'm doing it in the office instead, and for the company, like, making videos and, you know, helping them find bugs and stuff. So really, my life itself hasn't changed much at all. It's just that instead of doing it at home, I now do it in the office. I'm still trying to get accustomed to the work hours, because up until this point now, nearly 26, this is my first full-time job, because before that I obviously had my university, then I did streaming and stuff, so I was on my own terms, my own hours all the time. So now, like, the full work day, and I do like a 2-hour commute, is really draining, but it still feels nice to have some kind of routine for once, I'd say. So I'd definitely say that the stability thing is there, but for the reason for taking the job, I think it's just because I really want, as I said, as I keep saying, it's like a repeat, but I want the game to succeed. So as much as I can help to do that, then the better I will be. If I decide in the future to not be an employee and I want to compete in an esport game and I want it to be this game, I need the game to succeed. So if I can spend a year or so, really trying to push that agenda forward, and then I can then play the game, then that works out better than me, being a third party for an entire year and then watching the game fail.
Right. So I guess like that actually was going to be like another question I was going to ask, is if you felt that this was like your future career, or if you felt this was like something temporary and eventually you would want to hop back onto the competitive side or the content side, like as an individual rather than as a part of a company. And I guess you're still trying to weigh that up, I guess. Is that fair?
It's hard to say because I can't know how successful this game will be, of course. I don't see the future. If the game gets to such a great height that a player can live off a salary, being an organization, travel to these events, that's definitely something that I want to do. But it really depends also how much I'm needed or how good the job is going in a year's time as well. So it's not something I could choose right now, but I'm still I'm like 50-50 on both sides.
You're leaving all your options open, and that's probably the best way to go about it, to be honest. So obviously we've seen some stuff now about the second alpha, and of course that's going to be, like I said, I think it will drop the day after we drop this interview, if everything goes according to plan. That's kind of on me, so I'll try to make sure that happens. No, so and we've already kind of seen some of the stuff out there, and I was hoping that maybe I could pick your brain about it, because now you're on the other side of this alpha, right? And obviously I know there's going to be some things that you can't talk about. That's fair enough if you just have to say sorry, can't comment. But I have to ask. It's kind of my duty, like that. You know what I mean? This is to get as much as I can as an interviewer. But one of the biggest things about this changelog that I saw that I was like, whoa, when I read it, was the 30% speed decrease.
Yeah.
So obviously one of the core philosophies of Battalion has been to be this fast-paced shooter, like about the sprinting around and jumping around and strafing around. But this is kind of like something that seems like was pretty drastic to that then, if it's a 30% decrease across the board. So can you talk a little bit about this at all? Like, is there anything you can say about this?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually something that got commented quite a lot. I think it's like the thing that people notice the most. But what it is that the numerical values of 30% and 25% on the strafe within the Unreal Engine, it seems a lot more drastic than it actually is in game. Like the video that I put out today, or we put out today, you can see like I'm playing like a frag movie, and the movement itself it's actually more in line and more in tune with Pro Mod. I'd say actually it feels very, very similar now. Well, before it was just too fast in general, or just players were like sort of flying around. But yeah, the 30% actually, it sounds bigger than it is, basically. I think right now the movement is in a very good place. It feels really nice.
So basically you're saying it's still in line with the values of being like a fast-paced shooter that relies a lot on this movement, and that the 30% number on the surface looks like a lot, but in reality it's just tuning it more closely to the shooters it wants to be like. So the goal is still the same, basically. Yeah,
it's now better than it was before, at least.
Right, because I guess some people like maybe would have read this and wondered if it's trying to pace it back down more similarly to a Counter-Strike. I guess it's kind of like what it could look like on the surface, but okay. Glad we got some clarification on that. I guess the same goes for the strafe jump distance reduction. Would basically be in tune the same way then.
Yeah, it's the same. It's just like, they balance of each other, the movement and the strafe.
I also noticed that one of the other big things when it came to movement was the lean, speed, and distance, because I think people felt like the leaning in the first alpha didn't really add much, didn't really do much. So that seems to be something that has been changed quite a lot, which I'm kind of interested in this, because I might sound like an idiot here. So here we go. But I don't remember leaning very much in COD. Like, I know it existed, but it didn't really seem that dramatic there either, right? I mean, at least in Pro Mod, I don't remember it being that dramatic. But was it? Like, am I just misremembering it?
It was actually used relatively quite a lot in Pro Mod. COD 2, it wasn't used so much because it's a lot slower. I mean, in COD 2, you would really only use lean so much to, like, hold angles, because obviously you want to lean around a corner so your body is less shown. In COD 4 Pro Mod, it was used a lot more because I like as an SMG player, I would lean around pretty much every corner.
Right.
Because obviously, if I'm coming around a corner and an enemy is coming, I want to only show the smallest percentage of my body, so it's only like my top half, my neck, and my head, and I can see his entire body. So it's actually it was used a lot more than I think people remember it in COD 4.
Yeah, because I haven't played Pro Mod in so long that I can't remember, but I did play COD 2 recently, just like for shits and giggles, and like it didn't really seem like you were saying, it wasn't as dramatic in that game as maybe it was in Pro Mod. So yeah, I was kind of curious about.
It's because like in COD 4 you would walk around like with the SMGs and Deagles and stuff. You would walk around a lot more. You're in your sight and just walk around the map. In COD 2 you never really did that. Like you didn't really walk around. Just like you would more like crouch or just hold angles. It was a lot slower. It was more like linear, I guess. In times like a CS, like you would just hold angles and stuff. And the lean was really good for that rather than walking around and just like leaning like in COD 4.
Right. And then the other big thing was obviously that it's like a new Manor House version, which apparently has like some pretty big changes. Like they basically added like another house you could kind of walk through, and they closed off some stuff. And it's gonna be really hard to know until like I actually run around on it, and then I'm sure I'll notice it a lot more. But I guess my point is this map meant to be like an actual bomb defusal map for the true competitive side of the game, or is it meant to be like a team deathmatch free-for-all kind of like shoot 'em map? Because when I played the first version in the first alpha, I like could never seeing it being a bomb defusal map. No. But now I don't like, are they trying to gear it up that way now?
I'm pretty sure that it's meant to be a more of a TDM, like a starter kind of map just to run around on. But even still, as a small TDM map, it still is quite small. The extensions on the map aren't huge. Okay. They just make it like a bit bigger in some areas and just overall so it plays better. But I don't know. I don't believe it will be a main focused for S&D at all. The other maps that are in progress are a lot bigger than Manor House. Manor House is very small. It's something that people brought up. The Manor House is a very small map. This can't be a competitive map. The other maps are a lot bigger. They're more in tune with an S&D map. They take a lot longer. It's like 10, the standard 10 seconds to 15 seconds to get to each bomb site from the spawns and stuff. So yeah,
how far out do you think we are from seeing some of those, the public that is, seeing some of these other maps that you're referring to?
I know that at least one map is coming pretty soon in the next few, the next update. I'm not sure, or the update after. I'm not exactly sure when that is, so I can't comment on that. But one of them is at least coming pretty soon. Right. Or the early versions of it at least.
The other big thing. So we're gonna go away from the change logs now. We're just talking about the game itself. One of the most popular things, and one of the most interesting things, I think that people found from the first interview I did with Joe Brammer, at least like from the comments that I saw after that got published, it seemed like some of the biggest stuff that people are interested in from the stuff that he was talking about was the actual like competitive version of it, with like this whole like hybrid economy system and like all that stuff. Has any of that been discussed anymore or fleshed out anymore, or like is that still really like early on? Are you a part of that discussion? Like I know because you're a QA engineering community guy, but you obviously have a competitive background, so I feel like you would want to have some input on that as well if I had to guess. So I'm kind of curious if that's shaped up anymore on like what they want the competitive side to be.
That's being worked on quite a lot. It's actually one of the main focuses right now. That should definitely be coming out pretty soon. I'm not going to say an exact update or date just in case it doesn't and then I'm wrong, but it's definitely a big focus right now to get S&D mode into the game. Obviously TDM is not ideal. You can't really test maps or anything really how it plays unless you have the S&D mode, and it's a big focus too. Like having the S&D mode, it's a twist, as you said. The economy and stuff is it's something that I spoke about with Joe, and like we were running off ideas off each other and stuff in the early development of it to try and find a way to balance it and make it so it doesn't seem like it's a copycat of Counter-Strike. That's not really what you want. So that's why we don't have like the money system and stuff. It's more about like the reinforcements. It's a unique take, I guess, on an economy system. Yeah, but it's something that should be out pretty soon. It's in the works. I know it's something like a main focus right now.
Fair enough. So I mean, is there anything else that you can tell us about this alpha, like that you feel is going to be really important, or do you feel like people are really going to grab onto? Like, is there any like big highlights you think that will come out of this alpha as opposed to the first one, or something like that? Like, what do you think the main focus is, and like what you hope comes out of it?
I feel like this alpha is really it's just to see, because the first one was just so broken and so, I guess not really a word, but alpha-y, like, it's so alpha that it was, it is so broke. This one is a lot more, as I said before, it's a lot more of a solid build. It's really tuned. The movement feels good. The animations feel they're updated. You got new animations in there. The map itself is updated. It's the collision and everything is fixed. So the game should feel a lot better to play this time. Is really the thing. What the testing is for, so people can come back and say, okay, this actually feels good to play now, because before it was hard to tell whether the game was really that good to play because of what I said earlier, the 60 hertz and all the problems that come with a very first 0.1 alpha. So I think this one is more to see if everyone agrees that the game feels a lot more in tune and we're going in the right direction. The 0.3 alpha that I assume is coming in a couple of weeks as well, that's the one where a lot more content should be in it. It's like a bigger update.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing, is like there was like a pretty huge gap between the first alpha and the second one, right? I mean, I think it's been like a little bit over a month, or a month exactly, or something like that. Do you feel like alphas in the future will be a little bit more regular, or
I know their original plan was to have like an alpha every week.
Yeah, I know. I think a lot of people got confused, actually. Yeah. But I know that like E3 and other stuff was happening that they wanted to go to show off the game, and obviously that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I was just curious like what the alpha schedule might look like going forward.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly. I don't know the details of how long the next one will be. Yeah, as you said, the reason why is because they had their E3 there, ESL Cologne, and just generally doing fixes and stuff isn't that fast. I'm not sure why they mentioned it'll be a week at the start, because there's a lot of fixes, a lot of updates going in, and I think, as Joe said before, it actually takes like a couple of days to a week just to even prepare for an alpha test, because they need to make sure that the build is solid, that it's safe, that the servers work, that the host is work, that everything is going to run smoothly. So that actually takes like quite a while to test everything, just to have an alpha phase, let alone fix stuff and also do that stuff. But I would say it would. I don't know. I can't really say if it will be the same time or shorter. I don't know that information.
I hear you. So I guess like towards the end of this interview now, remember how I told you to hold on to those thoughts about the competitive side from earlier. Because I think with your background being a competitive player, and with myself being like a competitive player and commentator and stuff like that, I just kind of wanted to shape out the end of the interview kind of talking about Battalion in the setting of being an esport, because I feel like that's something that you've already kind of mentioned as like a goal of yours, and that's obviously like what you're passionate about. Same here. That's why I have my eyes on the game. It is because it's fun. Like when I played the alpha, I enjoyed it. When I saw the gameplay footage, when I saw the goals, it all tuned into something that I had a genuine interest in. But we mentioned how like the Call of Duty competitive scene kind of died off on the PC side of things, and like how Call of Duty is now like mostly a console market game. And so is the competitive end. Like, when you look at like what MLG does, or like Activision Blizzard now, of course, owns MLG, and they do all their events, and like COD has like their own World League, like CWL and things like that. And there's like events that go on, around the globe for pro COD, but that's all console based 4-on-4, and it's been that way ever since Call of Duty 4 Pro Mod, right? Every other Call of Duty title since then has been competitive on the console, and so I guess. Like, and you talked about how Call of War 2 is probably going to follow that same drift, right? I mean, there's no chance that game's going to be competitive on PC. It's going to be a competitive console game, just like every other Call of Duty's been for the last like 5 or 6 years, or maybe even longer than that, probably. Sometimes I fuck up my time scaling, but anyway, we know that's going to go. And you kind of mentioned Battalion. We're not even trying to target that same market. Like, we know COD's going to be on console. It's going to be a competitive console. We're aiming for the PC market, and I guess. My question to you is, do you think there still is like a niche there to fill on the PC side of things to be like a competitive shooter on the PC that kind of juxtaposes itself against like Call of Duty on console, so to speak? Or do you think that like the majority of competitive COD has already migrated to console, and so it's going to be a lot harder to establish a PC market again for a game like that?
I think there's definitely there is definitely a gap in the market for such a game. Because really, you look at like the top FPS games. Well, really, there's only you have CS. Obviously, you could possibly even put Quake there now. I mean, they have the $1 million tournament, but it's like its own, kind of thing. And then you have Overwatch, which I don't even really class as an FPS game. And I know that most of the people who played Pro Mod, where this market gap exists, where they don't have the game to play, it's like there isn't a game like Battalion that is at the top, as an esport. You have Rainbow Six as well, but it's so slow.
Right.
So I think that the massive gap is there, and really, what happened is that when I started Overwatch, we had like this private Discord, and what they did, Slasher, the main community guy, he got in all of the players from all of these other games that had died, like Battlefield, ET, Quake, Unreal, Shoot Mania, and just all these like FPS games that used to be big, COD 4 Pro Mod included, and he put them in one thing, and then that's where like you would see like all of these big like old names from Quake and these games in Overwatch in top teams, because they saw that game as, like me, their last chance to compete in a professional game, because they couldn't play CS, so the only other option was to play Overwatch. And I feel like that kind of still exists. Like if you don't want CS or you don't want Overwatch, or you like it's a World War II. It's probably the only game right now, apart from obviously if you take Quake out of the equation, that is based on movement. It's a faster paced game. I think it has its own as you said, niche. It's like its own market. I think people would, if the game was really polished, if it was made well, if it was a good game, people would want to play it. People from CS might play, Overwatch will play it. Really, it's just about like taking people from each market, I guess, and also like sweeping up the people who already don't like the games that are currently available. Because I see that it's like a common trend now, which I have myself, where I can't find a game to play. As you said, like I'm a lost guy
the
wandering.
Badlands.
But I see this with so many streamers and stuff. Like if you see like even like Summit and stuff, they're like streaming these random games like Lex. There's so many people I see, because PUBG is like there now too, I guess, but just as a casual
PUBG
game.
is getting huge.
And I see these like streamers and stuff, they say, I don't have a game to play, I don't know what to play. It's like a common thing where people they don't know what to play, they don't want to really play CS or PUBG because it's so saturated, or Overwatch, or so then Battalion can be there at some point in the future to play. It's a competitive game. If it has like a big esports scene, like it plans to, then I can't see why it wouldn't have a relatively good player base, a big player base. It's got developer support. It's made by people who want the game to succeed as an esport. It's not what's like Overwatch, where it's made by like a Blizzard or something, where they're trying to like force the esports onto it, even though the game isn't really made for esports. The game is made for esports, really, on competitive play. So
I mean, I think it is accurate to say that there really isn't a game on PC like Battalion. I mean, yeah, there are some other faster-paced shooters, like Quake, for instance, but Quake's not really... I don't even know what that's meant to be. Like, I mean, I know there's going to be like a TDM competitive side. I'm sure there's going to be a dual competitive side as well. I mean, I've always thought of Quake as like a 1v1 game, a duelist game. Quake I know that there's a TDM side of it as well, and there was in the past, and so you can kind of see the whole TDM fast-paced shooter aspect maybe with Quake Champions, and obviously like Overwatch to a degree is like a pretty fast-paced shooter depending on what class you're playing. And as far as like the feeling as a player, if it feels fast or not depends on like what class you play, obviously, but as a viewer it seems pretty fast-paced. It's always fairly constant action, building up alts, and then you have big team fights and things of that nature. But yeah, there really isn't like a... I mean, there's a 5-on-5 S&D game on PC. It's called Counter-Strike, right? But it's obviously not...
It's not a fast-paced 5v5 S&D game.
I mean, it can be in the sense that rounds may not last long because some teams are very aggressive. But as far as like the actual movement mechanics, there's no sprint. There's no... I mean, there is a lot of jumping around and shit now because of like movement accuracy with certain guns. We won't get into that. Triggered, of course, but we won't get into that. But there is certainly like a little niche there that I think Battalion certainly could fill. But I just wonder, like, does it really break through, or are some of the other games already like too well established? Like if you're a guy who wants to play competitive FPS on the PC, aren't you just going to go to Counter-Strike, or aren't you just going to go to Overwatch? Like I kind of wonder like where Battalion will nestle in.
I guess it really just depends if you when you say like you want to play a competitive game, is it the level of competitiveness? If you really like, do you want to be a pro player and do you feel like you can? But it's like me too. It's like I feel like I have the potential to be a pro player in a game if I really stick it out and really try. But at the same time, if I'm not enjoying the game that I'm playing, like Overwatch, where I just forced myself to play it and I didn't really like the game, I was just playing it because I wanted to be a pro player, then you have to like you have to want to play the game. You have to enjoy the game. Like the CS players and stuff, they love CS. They love CS is their life. They played CS forever. If I have that, the same as like COD 4 and stuff, but it really, I guess it comes down to what type of game you want to play. If the player wants to play, a game like CS, then he can play CS. If he wants to play a game like Battalion. It really depends on your end goal. As I said before, if you want to be a pro player and there is no pro scene, or there is no Battalion doesn't take off so much that you can make a living off it or whatnot, then I guess that person has to then wager up his options, whether he goes to Counter-Strike or he just continues to play Battalion.
Right.
Anyway, there's a lot of like variables, I think, in someone who would be choosing what they want to do if depending on where Battalion is at that time.
Right. Yeah, like I said, I think we both kind of agree that there seems to be a place for a game like this, and hopefully if it's released properly, as in like it's a good game on release, and yeah, it's more likely people will pick it up. And obviously like now it's streaming, like getting streamers involved and getting it in front of a bunch of eyeballs is obviously going to be a big goal, I'm sure, once you get a build that you want to get away from an NDA curtain and actually get into public consumption. So yeah, certainly a lot that goes into it. And so I guess like now from where you're sitting, like the final questions for this interview is like, what are your thoughts on the future of the game now? Like, I mean, we're about to have our second alpha. We'll see how that goes. Obviously, it's still really early on, obviously, but based on everything that you've seen so far and everything that you're seeing now, and just knowing the people that are behind the game and what their values and goals are, what do you think the future holds for Battalion?
Well, I would hope that it fulfills my vision as well as like the rest of the team, that this game does succeed in, and we release a really well-made, fundamentally mechanical game, which can be community driven. We put everything in place for the community to thrive in terms of competition and esports. I'd say at least I'm going to put like a time scale of I think by this time next year the game should be an incredibly good place. That's when it really could take off. That's where it would be in EA, and the game can thrive. So I'm hopeful. I guess I think we just need to keep working, obviously, getting the updates out, stick to our plan. There's always going to be like some kind of backlash and stuff, or negative comments about the game if it's not what people want, but I think we're going in the right direction. I think the decisions that the team are making are good in terms of competition and stuff. We're speaking to a lot of the contacts, ESL and stuff like that, to get Battalion in the public eye when the game is ready to do competition. We'll have early competitions and stuff like that. So I think everything is put in place. I think generally we're going in the right direction.
No, yeah, I mean, I think that's fair enough. Any thoughts on your own personal future now that you're an employee, you're on the other side? I mean, what are your thoughts on kind of how things are going for you personally? Then would be kind of like maybe my last question.
Well, I know that I will be at least at Bulkhead working on this game for a year, because that's how long I'm scheduled to be here. And then after that, whether I continue to do so is, as I said, dependent. If the game is, as I just said, a good place in July, then I can really choose then whether I continue to work from this side or go back to the player side. But for me, it's just continue what I'm doing now. The QA stuff. The QA stuff is obviously going to be coming a lot more into fruition over the next coming months when we have a lot more maps. There's a lot more things that can break. Right now the game is still very early, so I don't, on that side of things, I don't have a gigantic task because we've only got one properly playable map that we're putting out to the public, or the alpha testers. And yeah, the video stuff, I like to do the video stuff. It's something that I do at home anyway. I like to put out these informative videos. I think it's important to have like this kind of connection with the community where you put out these these nice, informative, professional looking videos. I know before I was here, the team weren't really putting out these kind of these update videos. It was more of like a vlog way they were doing it. Like it was just Joe in front of the camera, because they didn't really have someone there who could make the videos, or they didn't have time to do it, at least, as well, because they're too busy working on the game. So I think me doing this stuff is beneficial to the game and to the public as well.
Yeah, sure. I guess, like, do you think that with you doing what you're doing now with Bulkhead, that you'll still try to keep up with, like, your individual content? Like, is that still a goal of yours, to try to keep doing your YouTube and keep maybe streaming here and there? Like, is that a goal of yours to kind of do both?
Yeah, so it's something that, like, really died down this last month, because everything's just been so hectic. Like, I had to move apartment and stuff, so I didn't have internet, and then just trying to get into this, like, schedule. I get home like pretty late now as well, so I haven't streamed in quite a while now, maybe like 3 weeks or something. But I'm planning to start to stream at least on like Fridays and Friday, Saturday, Sunday on the weekend, and try and get some videos out within the week. So I can also, as I said in like a previous video, I sometimes, if I really just don't have much to do at the office, the QA stuff, where I have to complete a video, the team is so relaxed. They don't mind me making a video for my own channel in the office anyway. Like the last one was about Battalion, so really, it still benefits Battalion anyway.
Right, of course. All right. Well, cool. Is there any like last final thoughts or comments that you'd like to share before we sign off? Just like any final thoughts or comments to the community or to your fans or whatever. Just like I'll let you have the last word, I guess, is the point.
Yeah. Well, I guess people just have to try and believe. I know that Joe says it quite often. He's like, just believe in the team. We know what we're doing. But I feel like we do. It's just a matter of time. It takes time to make the game. Hopefully, as I said, in a year's time, everyone will be really happy with the outcome that the game has. We're working pretty hard. The game is making like great progress every day. It's something that I really enjoy now that I work at the office, that I can see the consistent progress. The maps, like I come in the office, I load up a newer version of the map from what the artists and stuff have done within that day, the day before. So I load up the map, and suddenly I'm like presented with all these new models, and the map looks great, and I'm just like, I can see the progress, and I can see the direction the game's going in, and I think it's going to be good when it's done. So I guess it's just a matter of time, is what I would say to people. It's just a matter of time until we can hopefully have a second good FPS esport title.
All right, there you go. All right, well, thanks so much for coming on. Hope everyone out there enjoyed it. If you do, please stop, subscribe for more content. And other than that, we're signing out until next time that we can do some more content like this. Hopefully, we'll talk to you in the future, maybe some other devs in the future, and certainly we'll try to keep cranking out Battalion content as it progresses. So yeah, thanks a lot.